Hello and welcome back to El Partido, yet another Spanish football podcast, but as always with a slight nostalgic twist. And this week I'm delighted to be joined by not only Paul, as per usual, but a brilliant guest too, who's going to tell us all about his brand spanking new book, A Football Odyssey. It is Rob Potts. Rob, welcome to the podcast.
Hi fellas, thanks for having me on.
Great to absolutely am. So good to have you on the podcast as well. And really thank you so much for sharing your new book with us and accepting our invite to come onto the podcast as well, because we tend to have a lot of authors come onto El Partido, who talk about very specific factual areas, whether it's like Real Madrid, like we did with Miguel Pereira recently, or San Lorenzo with Will Dalton. But I find your book absolutely fascinating because everyone who listens to this podcast will no doubt be an aficionado of visiting grounds, visiting destinations, and trying to get as much of a feel for them as possible. And this book essentially taps into not just Spanish football stadiums or Spanish destinations, but worldwide destinations as well, which is a really, really brilliant concept, and one I think really just touches the nerve on everyone who wants to maybe get out of the borders of the UK, for example, and go and explore football elsewhere. Paul, before we ask Rob, obviously, how we got into this, you will no doubt have had a quick read of the materials as well. This is an exciting book, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it is. I absolutely love it, Rob. I'm not just saying that, some people will tell you that I'm a little bit too honest sometimes, but I genuinely love this book. I thought the way that you've laid it out, it kind of, the format of it reminds me a little bit of like if I'm looking at a Lonely Planet book, if I'm going to a city, because you've got the tips and what to, it's, you get a real feel for the culture, and it's, you deliver it in a way that it's like a guide of, sort of questions that you kind of wonder, but sometimes you're afraid to ask. So it's all there, black and white. I think it's a really cool concept, and I do like the fact that there's, obviously we're here for the Spanish football, but I've been to games in Germany and Portugal and stuff, and I love the fact that it's all encompassing of 80 different destinations essentially in different cities. So yeah, I'm thoroughly enjoying what I'm reading so far.
Oh, I'm glad you like it. I mean, the rationale when I was setting out, I approached the publisher Blue Moose. If you don't know Blue Moose at all, it's an independent publisher, but they put out some amazing novels in the last few years, a couple of which have been adapted for the TV. And it's run by a guy called Kevin Duffy, who's a massive football fan. He's a massive Man City fan. I just remember pitching 2 ideas for books. One of them was very much explicitly the kind of Lonely Planet for groundhoppers. And the other idea, I love the kind of politics and social side, football as well. And I love those books by, Tim Marshall, the geopolitics author. And I'd sort of pitched to Kevin, look, what about a kind of geopolitical, social exploration of football and its culture? And Kevin immediately got back to me and said, I love the guidebook, but I want you to write it like Tim Marshall would write the guidebook. So kind of fused the 2 ideas. And as soon as he said it, it just made immediate sense. And it made it a lot of fun to write. I suppose the biggest panic then is like, how am I going to fund getting to 80 grounds over the next couple of years? But luckily, I think the big thing, unless you've got a trust fund or unless you've got a 6-figure advance, it's not going to happen. But what you do have as a football fan, you have lots of mates. So I probably covered half the locations myself. But others, it was like I had friends going to different places. So I'm like, right, you have to Valencia next weekend. Make sure you got La Mestalla. Take a notebook, take a camera. And we took it from there. And then from that, it was a matter of, interviewing people, researching. And I'm really pleased with how it's ended up in the end. And what I'm hoping is when people read it, they're kind of intrigued by the narratives. Every chapter very much has a slightly different narrative, a sort of hook to get you interested in each of the clubs. But what I've then tried to do is kind of encourage people, well, why don't you go there now? And that's where the advice and the tips and the travel and the logistics come in. And I'm hoping people read it and not only inspired to do it, but I think realise it's an achievable hobby. You know, you see a lot of these TV travel programs, it tends to be celebrities. And I think the appeal of those, it's you can't afford to do this, but come and have a look at this highly paid celebrity who'll show you around anyway. What I've tried to show is actually is a bloke just like you who is doing this on a shoestring. He's going to give you a really good insight into why you should try and do it yourself. And he's actually going to make it really clear how you go about doing it yourself. So I'm hoping that's the outcome when people read it and hopefully enjoy it.
Yeah, I think that's a massive part of it that I enjoy. To talk to echo what you said, Paul, as well. Is it's kind of like you get the sell, and that is the learning about something that you wouldn't ordinarily know about. For example, we've just had the UEFA Conference League final, and the absolute outpouring of love for Rayo Vallecano today, especially from Crystal Palace fans, has basically everybody scrambling to learn more about the club, their situation, the Barrio Vallecas and things like that. And what I get from the chapters I've read of this book so far is it gives you all that. It gives you the knowledge and the comfort as well, because I would possibly refer to myself as maybe I'm not a ground hopper, but I'm a seasoned visitor of Spain, especially to grounds and to go, I've gone to see La Liga games. I've been down to Segunda Federación games, but there is always a sort of an element of me where I'm a bit like, where do I go? How do I fit in? What do I need to know here? And I think this book, perfectly scratches that itch for it. And in terms of the sort of like how it's built as well, the fact that you're going ground by ground rather than sort of like trying to jump from story to story, I think that's perfect for this as well. I assume that was an intentional sort of like operative point from you when you were writing the book.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, what I wanted to do is for this to almost be a global journey. So there's a kind of pathway that the chapters follow. It's no coincidence that I start quite close to home. So there's a couple of chapters on non-league clubs in England. Then we got Scotland, Ireland, Wales, and then it starts kind of meandering further out. And I've kind of done that almost as a kind of ascending scale. So if you live in Manchester, if you live in Liverpool, you can get to Sheffield FC by jumping in a car or on a train. By the time you get to the final chapters where you got the La Bombanera and you got the Maracanã, now we're talking bucket list territory, and it's kind of very much builds up to that in the book. Here's the things you can do on a shoestring, and here's the things that are perhaps slightly more aspirational further down the road.
Yeah, it's like a dip your toe in kind of thing, isn't it, Paul?
Yeah, I like that. It's build yourself up gradually. Once you found your feet and got your confidence, go into the one down the road. Now do the one, the other side of the country, and then the other side of the continent, and then the other side of the world. I like that.
Yeah. I can see a world in this where, so I this isn't football, and this is one of these tangents I speak about a lot, Rob. I'm a massive fan of Stanley Tucci in his books, and he does a one where he does a lot of touring around Italy, and I'm trying to like follow the places that he's been to, visit the restaurants he's been to, and there's actually now sort of like a Stanley Tucci tour. Wouldn't it be great if we can get like an Odyssey tour done and get people to sort of like checklist where they've been off, and sort of like even in the book like have a little scribble through and say, right, I've done that one, I've done that one, done that one. These kind of books do tend to grow legs like that, don't they? And they sort of like integrate themselves into a bit like a diary or an agenda for people to go to.
Yeah, I mean, I did even pitch to the publisher, why don't we include as a kind of free gift a map with all the destinations, so you can tick off the destinations. But unfortunately, publishers aren't fond of giving things away when they don't need to. It might be something we can add later. Maybe people could. I've got one on the wall behind me there. Maybe people could make their own maps and tick them off. But it'd be lovely if people did follow some of these trips.
Yeah, that'd be good. Like say, put a sticker of the stadium on or scratch it off or something like that. I'd definitely be really good. Sorry, Paul, I interrupted you earlier. You were going to say something.
Oh no, it's all right. To be honest with you, I was just enjoying the chat and listening. So whatever I was going to say, not important. It's fine.
Oh, that sounds good. Well, I'll tell you what, let's get into the meat of the book then. And like I said, because we are a Spanish football podcast, we are going to focus on the Spanish element of this. But I can tell you this for free, like you say, over 80 destinations worldwide. There are some really sort of like obscure destinations in there as well. So I do highly recommend you go through them one by one and take that journey as we've been discussing. But The first one we're going to talk about is the El Clásico cities. Obviously, we've got Barcelona and Madrid. Sort of like focusing on those two big iconic stadiums. Noting as well there are other stadiums in those cities as well. In terms of the lens of when you write about Madrid and Barcelona, Rob, obviously these are two very contrasting cities in how they look at football, how they identify with football, and how they do football, basically. What were the main differences that you found between Madrid and Barcelona as footballing cities?
I think the big ones, obviously, if you read any of Miguel Pereira's stuff on his last book, Passion, about Spanish football, you've got the whole historic context, you've got the whole, Franco era and all the rest of it. What I've homed in on very much is the kind of Catalan identity and how important Barcelona is to that. Whereas Madrid, I've kind of used Madrid as a kind of focus point, and I'm a Manchester United fan, so I know a lot about this, where the club almost becomes too big and too detached, too separate from the fans. And that, that was one of the reasons why I was really keen to include Rayo Vallecano. And obviously, what we all watched last night, I think that's probably going to have even more eyeballs. A lot of people probably flicking on the game last night saying, where are they even from? And so I think the thing with both the kind of big monolithic clubs in Spain, you've got to include them in the book, because lots of people are going to want to go there. But for me, as interesting as they both are, they're only, I think they obscure actually a lot of the other good stuff that's going on in Spanish football. And all I want to talk about those clubs, and I know people are interested, as I say, particularly for me, the interesting thing is the Catalan identity with Barcelona. What I've tried to signal to people, actually, there's much more of Spanish football and Spanish football culture than El Clásico.
Yeah, and I could definitely, really buy into that. And I think that's what Barcelona does perfectly as well. And Paul, I don't know about your experience, because I know that you've been to Madrid a few times, and you've been to the Santiago Bernabeu. There is clearly a passion there. There is clearly a very vocal fan base and things like that. But I always feel like maybe, and I don't know if this is maybe a capital city thing or something like that, football just feels slightly more sanitized at the top table of Madrid. Compare that to Barcelona, for example. Now, there is a shift happening in Barcelona. Let's not forget, you've got the emergence of all these barrios clubs like Europa and San Andreu and places such as that. But ultimately, the Barcelona fan is possibly, that's slightly more animated than what you get at Real Madrid. Mm-hmm. Would you find that comparison quite fair, or am I being a bit harsh there, or am I isolating all the Real Madrid fans in one fell swoop? I'm not too sure.
I don't think you're putting it all. I don't think you tarnish them all the same brush or anything like that. So I went to the Camp Nou, the old Camp Nou, before they knocked it down and they've rebuilt this one, and that was it felt like a Colosseum in general, a modern day Colosseum in terms of architecture, and the fact that when you were through the turnstiles and you were on the inside, it was largely concrete and not as polished with confectionery stands or anything like that as compared to other stadiums, and obviously that open air thing. But what was really, and this, I'm going to answer your question by speaking about Barca first, which I know is kind of going to rile a few people up, but the old Camp Nou was surrounded by, on one side, I suppose, really more than the other, flats that had bars at the bottom of the building, and they all had the Senyera out, and the Catalan flag was very prominent around the stadium on the outside, even though on the inside it was all red and blue. There was a lot of red and yellow being shown, and it did feel like a bit of a beacon to just that talks to Catalan independence, where you could see that in a stadium of that size there was still plenty of locals that attended and would go regularly. I also went to Santiago Bernabeu, as you said, but I went to the old one before that. It's just been knocked down and rebuilt. In fact, my last game before the world stopped for the COVID pandemic was Champions League, the 2-1 defeat to Manchester City at the Bernabeu, and that felt very much like a commercial venue that you're attending. Now, I can only imagine that that's ramped up even further with the new or the renovated stadium in Madrid. Where there's all this talk about it's got sushi bars in it, it's got all sorts of
Starbucks.
yeah. But even then, as an away fan going to the Bernabeu, it did feel like you were surrounded by people who were very moneyed, whereas I didn't quite get that same feeling at the Camp Nou. And it was very obvious that I don't like to use this phrase, but I think it's kind of becoming quite an apt way of describing certainly Premier League football, but also some of the top clubs. It felt like a cash extraction exercise, So to answer your question about what does it mean between the two, I don't think you're being unfair by saying that there's almost like a polished or use the word clinical, didn't you, version for the Bernabeu versus the Camp Nou. But I haven't been to the new Camp Nou, and obviously it's not fully finished yet. But I would imagine that will rival anything that Madrid have done in terms of making it about the phrase they all use now, the match day experience. I would anticipate that, and I hope that even with that modern commercialization, there is still room for the locals to go in the same numbers as they were when I attended the old Camp Nou. I hope, but I don't know for certain that would be the case.
No, I think the word hope's doing a lot of heavy lifting there as well, isn't it? I think I've not obviously the new Camp Nou is not finished yet. It'll be interesting to see what it's like, but I suspect it's going to become something very similar to what you're already seeing in Madrid. I hope I'm wrong, but I do. They've got to pay for it for one thing, so
I think that's the big thing, isn't it? It's when does a ground stop being a ground and it becomes more like an arena, becomes like a concert venue type thing. And obviously you've got to find ways to like you say, pay for these things, but it's what do you lose when you do that? And unfortunately with the Spotify Camp Nou as well, they've had to obviously clear a lot of the land around it, so they've probably reclaimed a lot of some of those neighborhoods where those bars will have been and things like that. And I think that's maybe one of the driving forces of people wanting to go to places like Vallecas, because the two obviously tales that you've got is that it's really authentic, it's really entrenched in its community, it's a proper barrios football, but that is also by distinction as well, if that makes sense. It's staying that way because it is being forced to stay that way by the owner. Presser.
That's a real key point to emphasize for anybody who isn't familiar with it. Is it's not that way by design. It's not that way by design in terms of in a positive sense. It's being forced into that predicament by the way that the club's being run by the president. But it does have, exactly as you say there, that attraction. There's that marketing term about, scarcity being a real driver of price and value and everything like that. You could say that if it was intended to be that way, Rayo Vallecano would be, a real expensive ticket to buy, because you're paying for what is essentially, nowadays more of a novelty, but it's not done through any reason than sheer neglect, I guess.
No, I mean, I guess that's the paradox. So there'll be more than a fair percentage of people last night who were turning on that game because an English club involved. Don't know if a single thing about Rayo Vallecano. I think what's happened. I mean, I watched the first half hour in my local pub, and I was trying to kind of articulate to some of the fellas in there who they are and why it's so significant that they're there, because they were all supporting the English club. I'm like, no, I'm supporting Rayo because it's just such a great story. And the only thing I waited to was this is like Seacroft, which is like a kind of housing estate on the other side of Leeds. This is like Seacroft having a team in the Premier League and getting to the European final. How can you not back this? It's so romantic. And I think by the end of the game, they charmed a lot of people. I think the social media coverage has been insane. The marches to the stadiums and the way that they dealt with defeat as well. And I think it summed them up as a club. The paradox will be, now they've got all these eyeballs, they're going to suddenly get a deluge of people want to get there. And hopefully it doesn't take them away from, what the club actually are, and they don't lose, that special thing. Because there are other clubs like that who've got this kind of built up this kind of counterculture movement.
Yeah.
but then almost fall into the trap of becoming the thing they were trying to avoid being. So we'll see. Hopefully it'll help the club, because they need the money and they need, need the support, but hopefully it doesn't pull them away from what they actually are.
Yeah.
No, absolutely, and I think in terms of going to Vallecas as well, Rob, when you get around that ground and you emerge from the metro and you're in amongst it, that's exactly what certainly the Santiago Bernabeu doesn't have, and what we fear the Spotify Camp Nou won't have. It's the fact that you can walk straight into a shop, and it's filled with Rayo fans, and they're getting like a canya for this short walk around the corner, or you're into the bars getting like a pin show and things like that, amongst them as well, and they are proper, it's a very working class community, a part of a suburb of Madrid, and there are people who are spending their hard earned money to support their club, to put the money into the club, and I think that offers a bit more of an authenticity for your ardent groundhopper as well, wouldn't it? I'd prefer to say. I think if you was to ask 10 groundhoppers, where would you rather be on a Saturday afternoon, the Santiago Bernabeu or Vallecas, I dare say 8-9 out of 10 would definitely be aiming for Vallecas at this point.
I think you're dead right. I think there's a kind of very much a 50-50 split when people go on ground hopping trips. I think you get a lot of people who are there because they want to go to the kind of bucket list iconic venues and take the selfie and splurge a load of money in the souvenir shop, and they can say they've been there. I think the other half, and I suspect we all fall in this category, are people who don't want a kind of identity of what they can find in the Premier League, and they want to find a form of football and a football culture that is still kind of quite raw and intact and still quite genuine. So for me, 99 times out of 100, I'm going to Vallecas, but I do think you're right. I think there's probably a split.
Yeah, very much each their own, aren't they? And to maybe just move away from the capitals of Madrid and obviously the capital of Catalonia, Barcelona at the moment. There is, the chapter I really enjoyed when I was reading your book earlier was the one on Athletic Club, and sort of like, the amount of like history and information and really key points that were sort of like added into that before we obviously get to the most important part, which is what great food, where to go, things like that. It's, Athletic Club is, we've had Christopher Evans on this podcast before to tell us, how unique this club is. But actually experiencing San Mamés and experiencing Bilbao as a city, it is incredible, isn't it? They say unique in the world. I think this genuinely is, for me, one of the greatest stadiums you could visit to in Spain. But also as well, the fact that they've managed to keep that soul, keep that atmosphere in a brand new stadium, let's not forget, that they had previously. That's not an easy trick to do, is it?
No, I think a lot of that speaks to the core of the club, though, and the culture of the club. The fact that they're still a club that insists on this kind of Basque identity. And, most clubs would have caved in by this point. As I mentioned before, I'm a Manchester United fan. Our big calling card is that we've gone 70, 80 years, always making sure we've got an academy graduate in the match day squad. A couple of times, the last couple of years, we've kind of nearly veered from that. But that's one player. This is a club that says, actually, no, we would sooner stick to those principles and stick to those ideals than kind of follow the crowd, if you like. So I think if you've got that kind of strong, value-based approach to running a club, actually the bricks and mortar of the stadium really should just fall into line with it.
Yeah. And I think we've spoken about Athletic Club in various episodes in the past for many different reasons. We've obviously, as you mentioned, we've had Christopher on to talk about his brilliant book, but we've also we talked about, it was one of the episodes we did around stadiums in Spain and how the old San Mamés was the cathedral. It had that iconic arch, and it was really like a center or a focal point in the town. And it's not very often that a new stadium, a shiny new stadium, still has that sort of ability to connect with the fans and appeal and actually look like, yeah, it's a modern stadium, but I really, really would quite like to go there. But I think it's fair to say, and we've agreed on this in the past, that the new San Mamés is certainly up there for us. Architecturally, it looks great. Atmosphere wise, particularly on on Derby Day, it looks fantastic. But I've not heard anybody who's been there say a bad thing about it. And considering it's a modern stadium design, that's quite unique as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the pitfalls with modern stadium teams tend to vacate a kind of centrally located venue that might be a bit kind of, rough around the edges, but it's in the center, it's in the heart of the city or in the heart of the town, and then they move into the middle of nowhere. And I think that often is one of the pitfalls with building new stadia. But it's good that our athletic club have managed to maintain that core.
Yeah,
and it's a real, dominating feature of the skyline in Bilbao as well, alongside the likes of the Guggenheim Museum. And we were speaking earlier about how you can, go to those bars around the stadium. Well, if you like your food and your drink and things like that, the fact that you can meander from a side street and then all of a sudden this stadium opens up in front of you is sort of like the perfect destination. And the food, in Bilbao, in the Basque Country in general, to be fair, there are fewer sort of like culinary centres that you would, you'll be well fed if you end up in Bilbao. And like you said, Paul, the fact that they still, call it La Catedral, this absolute centre, and the atmosphere that you can get, and that stems to the history of the club, as you said, Rob, isn't it? This was a beacon of, the anti-establishment of the time. We go back to talk about how that the language and the culture was trying to be erased by the fascist Francoist regime. You even noted a fact in there that I wasn't fully aware of, was the fact that they started to industrialize a lot of Bilbao and the surrounding area to try and force sort of like more Spanish labor from the likes of Andalusia, like what happened in Barcelona, to try and Spainify it a little bit more, but it still managed to keep that, such unique identity, which is, absolutely incredible, isn't it?
No, absolutely, yeah. And I think one of the phrases used to describe Spain is that it's a nation of nations. And I think probably a lot of people who just kind of switch on the TV and watch Spanish football on TV and enjoy watching El Clasico, I think they probably overlook the kind of diversity and, the different cultures, and that very much that sense of not national identity, but certainly regional identity that you've got in different parts of Spain. And I think, Athletic Club are a really good embodiment of that. And hopefully, more people. I think the one issue with Bilbao, it's not necessarily the easiest city in Spain to get to, compared to Barcelona, Madrid, Valencia, Malaga. But hopefully more people are encouraged to get there. I know last year with the Europa League final, speaking to a lot of Manchester United and Spurs fans, it probably wasn't the ideal venue in terms of logistics and location. I don't think when they kind of planned that as the final venue, they were necessarily anticipating having two English clubs there, and I think that caused a lot of problems. But certainly all the people I spoke to, some have had really challenging experiences, having to sleep on the floor of the bus station and missing flights and all the rest of it. But all of them at least came away with a really good impression. Hopefully a lot of them are going to go back there and, see the home side play.
Yeah, I think that's 100%, and that's the difficulty. Especially we're three northern-based chaps. I think the difficulty is sometimes if you're not flying out of London, Heathrow, or Gatwick, you're only going to, as you've mentioned, Rob, a handful of destinations for that way. And I would definitely say to people to get to not just Bilbao as well. Bilbao is great for going to see an athletic club, but I also host another podcast called El Podo, which is about Spanish non-league. There's some brilliant teams, all in their own barrios, such as Sestao River, Baracaldo, Arenas de Getxo. So there's plenty more football to see in the city. Or as you mentioned in the book, if you hop on a short train or bus ride towards the French border, you could be going to see Real Sociedad as well, which is another brilliant club that has its own identity, its own way of working. Obviously, this season's Copa del Rey winner. So you can be quite spoilt for choice if you can get there. That's the main bit, isn't it?
Yeah, I think sometimes a lot of fans got really imaginative to get there for that particular final last year. And, if you got the time, as you suggest there, it's something where you could do a really interesting and exciting road trip, even both sides of the border, because obviously, like Catalonia, the Basque Country expands. You know, both sides of that kind of nominal border between Spain and France. You can fly into Biarritz, for example, and then make your way to land. There's a bus from there that'll take you there. Similar story with Catalonia, someone I've been quite a lot, and it's interesting. You get that real sense, more so than when you're in Barcelona, actually, but you get that real sense of that strong Catalan identity when you head to some of the border towns in France, and when you head to Girona, for example. You know, when you go to Girona, you're in no doubt at all that you're in Catalonia, whereas in Barcelona, I think because it's a bigger city, they've had quite a lot of demographic changes. It's obviously more of a hub for tourists. It's a little bit more generic. You head to Girona, suddenly you realise straight away, this isn't Spain as I imagine, that this is Catalonia. And I think, you know, probably even more so to Bilbao.
Oh, definitely. I would definitely echo. I know, Paul, you as well. I know you've been to quite a few places in Catalonia as well, in terms of how, you know, with it being such a big area, it can vary so much. And I think that's something that's also replicated when, you know, you mentioned before that Spain is a nation of nations, and, you know, the largest nation, I'll use air quotes on a podcast, is Andalusia, the biggest region by far. And, you know, as we said before I came on, I'm a Malaga fan. I went to Seville in the Easter break, and I've been there before, but I didn't really get to see much of the football stuff. I was on a family holiday, and technically I was on a family holiday this time, but I made to make a couple of planned detours would be the word I would use. You know, convenient parking spaces near the Roman Sanchez Pizjuan, for example. You speak in the book, Rob, you know, when you went to Seville, that this is a underrated football city in terms of what you can do when you get there. And obviously, you know, the type of teams that you've got here. I would have to really much agree with you, because as much as you've got these two massive clubs in, it's not often a destination people talk about when they're saying, oh, I'm going away for a football weekender, I'm going to Seville. It's one that's kind of gone under the radar, hasn't it?
I think it comes back to the idea of people having bucket list destinations. It does tend to be Madrid or Barcelona, just because the sheer kind of pull and mystique of El Clasico. But if anyone asks me, where would you go for a first trip to Spain? Every time I'll say Seville. It's an amazing city, and whether you're there on Sevilla home weekend, or if you're there for a Betis home weekend, you can have a really rewarding experience, but also quite a contrasting experience. You know, obviously Betis are away from the Via Marin at the moment, but you know, when they are there, it's a very different match day experience there to what you get at Sevilla's ground. So I definitely recommend it. And I think just as a city, it's really vibrant, it's really exciting. What I've tried to do in the book as well is steer people away from the tourist traps, because there are tourist traps just like there are in any other city. I think where you really get the heartbeat of Sevilla is when you head into the barrios and you go into a place like Triana and Fedea, Macarena, and you're experiencing the local food, experiencing the local prices as well, which helps with the budget. You see that passion for football as well. You know, when you're in the area around sort of Ferreira, you'll see these little Juliet balconies, and they'll either have Catholic kind of imagery hanging on banners there, or if not, it'll be a Betis banner or a Betis flag. And yeah, to me, it's a much, even though Sevilla is a big city and it's a financial centre for the region, it's a much more raw experience, and I think you get much closer to the kind of local identity.
Yeah. I'd agree with that as well, Paul, wouldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I am doing everything I can to convince my wife that the next holiday we go on as a city break is Seville, because I've been through it, but not long enough to take it all in, you know, as a city. And you know, I've sold it to her on the basis of, look, if we time it right, we can smell the oranges in the trees and everything like that. And yeah, I think she is sold on it. But then it's the whole, and whilst we're there, there's a football match, you know. But it's a wonderful wonderful city, and obviously being the epicenter of Andalusia, it's the sort of it's got with it a lot of the almost cliche sort of stereotypical Spanish things. You know, you will see people in certain dress types and castanets and things like that. You know, it's but it's genuine. It's so nice and it's so hot though as well.
Yeah, I can testify to that walking around in. I thought it'd be trouser weather in Easter time because we went for Semana Santa and things like that. At no point in the year should you wear trousers in Seville if you're from the northwest of England. Let's put it that way. But when I found when I went there as well, and this really lends itself to the city of Seville, is my Spanish is very broken. I can speak a little bit. I don't speak it very fluently. However, every single taxi driver or person I met in a bar or in a restaurant, it was, are you Sevillano or Betico? And then you just end up in this massive conversation. And depending on who you speak to, whether it's a Sevilla a fan or a Betis fan, you can get the passion from them straight away and you can see how much it means to them. But you can also get a sense of sort of like almost a disgust that you've asked them that you might support the other team.
Yeah.
And I think, like you say, when you meet the fan bases of these two sides, and me and Paul did a podcast recently about, El Gran Derby, which is actually a La Liga-ism, isn't it? It sort of like was coined by the TV directors rather than the people of the city. But you can get a sense that, next to religion, football is the next religion, basically, in Seville. And I think that lends itself to the experiences you have when you go to the grounds, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a pal there, James, is a Bristolian, big Bristol City fan. And I met him a couple of years ago when I was out there. And I was sitting in a bar, minding my own business. And I got a shout going, "Hey, are you English?" I'm like, "Yeah." "Oh, come and sit with us." And it was James and his mate, Dave. "Oh, what are you doing?" I'm off to the Seville game tonight. "Why are you going there?" I'm like, "Because I want to see some football." No, don't go and watch Seville, watch Betis. And I went and I enjoyed. And this is someone who's, kind of assimilated to life in the city, but the club's absolutely bled into him. And I got back and we chatted. And I said, "I really enjoyed it." He said, "No, I was joking. It's a great experience at Seville." Because promise me, you come back and you'll come and watch Betis. And to be fair, I got straight on Sky Scanner when I got home. Got a couple of flights and managed to get to a Betis game within a couple of months. And again, completely contrasting experience. But both times there's just, I don't know, compared to some of the bigger clubs, you feel as though you were sitting shoulder to shoulder with the local people. And that for me is one of the big appeals. You're not surrounded. I remember going to Barcelona probably 12, 15 years ago. And it was when, the golden era, you've got Suarez, you've got Messi, you've got Neymar playing. And it was great. And being able to say, "Oh, yeah, I saw these guys play for Barcelona at the time when, they were probably the height of the power." But part of you're sitting in the stadium, you're thinking, actually, there's lots of English accents here. There's lots of people here just like me. And actually, when I go to a ground, I don't want to hear people. I want to be there with the locals. And I think both of those clubs, even though they're massive clubs, their attendances for both are incredible, really, particularly given, the relative lack of success over recent years. But you're there amongst local people and you really feel that passion. And, there's all these little quirks. It's even down to stupid things like you're sitting there in the stadium at Sevilla. And I suffer a little bit from vertigo. And if you, like a lot of Spanish stadiums, you feel as though you're going to do yourself a mischief. But you look around the floor and there's all these little kind of sunflower shells there because people are just munching away in them. And then you've got a Betis and, compared to Sevilla, there's not lots of amenities around the ground. But you've got just these crowds of people all with the cañas and the botellas and all the rest of it, just drink. And it's a real carnival. And then you get in the ground. I was really fortunate the night I went was they were playing Rayo Vallecano as it happened. And it was the last game before Christmas. And then at half time comes and you've got this shower of teddy bears and cuddly toys. And I'd heard about it and I'd seen people sharing videos online and all the rest of it. But until you're there and you just see literally this shower cascading onto the pitch and then the stewards having to kind of round them up quickly and put them in bags. And yeah, they're both really special clubs. But hand on heart, I'm probably a little bit of a closet Betico.
That was going to be my next question, to be fair. If I asked you to pick one, I can't pick one, unfortunately, because I'm a Malaga fan, so I can't be in this, but it sounds like... and I think, what, it doesn't surprise me, because I think, being, from the north of England as well, I think that we have natural affinities to clubs like that as well, like Real Betis, like Rayo Vallecano. I think it's just maybe in our fabric. But there is something about Seville for me, that where we do see some clubs really sort of like leaning into, and it's a bit of a dirty word at the minute, but it's not one that we chastise too much, but football tourism is what it's being sort of like labelled as, whereas you probably see that more at the Bernabeu. Unfortunately, I imagine it's probably going to be something you see a lot more at the Spotify Camp Nou with some of the pricing we saw for the return game, for example. But ultimately, I think Sevilla, Real Betis, I'd even put Valencia into this as well. They just won't allow themselves to be, for want of a word, occupied like that. When they won't allow the club to bend that way simply.
I certainly hope not. I mean, once you get the eyeballs on you, though, and you've got that demand, it can be quite tempting, I suppose, for any club. I don't think anyone's got that kind of moral purity that, if they've suddenly got a new market who will happily spend €400 on a match ticket, it's going to be a brave club administrator that turns it down. But I really do hope that it doesn't go that way. I think, as I said, for a lot of people who go travelling, and particularly heading into continental Europe to watch football, a lot of it is a reaction to just how commercialised the Premier League has become and how detached the fans are. I had to ring early to renew my membership and try and sort out a season ticket for next year at Manchester United. I spent half an hour on the phone trying to evade their new AI assistant, John. You get a little message saying, we've got a new AI assistant called John. John is still learning, so please be patient with him. And you end up, I'm on the speakerphone in the car, you end up trying to trick him into letting you speak to a person. At one point, I said, I'm dying, please put me onto a human. And you get, oh, well, if you're dying, please put down the phone and call an ambulance. And it was just true story. And the only way I got through to a human in this 30-minute phone call, in the end, I said, look, I'm a millionaire, John. I want to spend lots of money on a corporate box. I'll just transfer you through now. And I got through to someone and she sorted out my problems. And but hopefully we don't get Juan at Betis or Sevilla, because that'd be an absolute
Imagine the neck snapping feeling if Pressa went completely the other way and introduced AI Juan at Real Vallecano. That'd be something to discuss, wouldn't it? But yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I think that's what a lot of people find when they come from, especially these shores, to any kind of level of Spanish football. To be fair, is that you still get that authenticity. I think is the main part of it. And certainly, I'm a Blackpool fan for my sins at home. And even I can see down in League One, as much as the club is better run than it was, there's some elements of it that you go, that's a bit posh for Blackpool. That let's call a spade. We are what we are. We don't need these kind of fancy camera tricks. And what was the one that they introduced not long ago? Oh, they do a Friday night studio thing. I'm like, one, that's a room in the hotel. You're not tricking anybody. That's a studio at Bloomfield Road. It just doesn't happen. And two, we don't need it. Just a post-match interview or a pre-match interview will satisfy, because we still like to keep that authenticity. And that's what Spanish football does. And I think one of the the points you made in the book about one of the destinations that you went to in Spain was, if you're there, take the opportunity to go. And I think that's the big thing that especially we were talking about before it came on air. If you're going to go to a Malaga, or you're going to go to a Tarragona, or you're going to go to the Canary Islands, don't go and sit and watch the 3:00 football between Burnley and Leeds. Go to La Rosaleda, go to the New Costa Doruda, go to the Estadio de Gran Canaria to watch a game whilst you're there, because you will regret it if you don't, will you?
Yeah, I mean, that's why.
Sorry, I was going to say, that's a terrible example you've used there, Nick, because any game, any level would be better than watching Burnley versus Leeds. I mean, the two teams at the moment that are just not really, and I know, obviously, Rob, your location might put you at risk with me making that comment and you nodding along, but, but I think, sorry to jump in on the point, I think that's one of the key takeaways anybody should have from this book is seize the opportunity while you've got it and you're in these locations.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I mentioned before coming on, some people who'd read the book or had a look at some of the chapters, like, you've got Las Palmas in there. Why have you got Las Palmas in there? And they're there really for symbolic purposes. You know, I used to take my kids on holiday every year to Gran Canaria, and you're sitting there, as you say, everyone's sunburned, drinking, you know, imported lager in the pub and watching, you know, Scottish Premiership or the Premier League on a dodgy stick. And you're like, there's a La Liga club. I certainly wasn't until recently. There's a La Liga club an hour up the road on the bus. Get off there. And there are lots of Las Palmas. And, you know, the other interesting thing, and it goes back to the idea of the kind of Spain being the nation of nations, the Spanish second tier now is so interesting. It's, you know, geographically, culturally, it's so diverse. You've got all these different locations to go for, you know. Until recently, obviously, we've got the two big iconic clubs being promoted, but you've got these sort of very historic clubs. You've got, you know, Ceuta in North Africa. You've got Andorra. You know, as you say, get out there. Get away from the TV. Get away from the glitching kind of dodgy fire stick that they're trying to entice you with, and get out there and watch some football and meet some real Spanish people and enjoy the local customs, because, you know, you're going to get something out of it.
Yeah, you're absolutely spot on with that one. And we do have sort of like, I'm going to call him Mr. Las Palmas on this podcast because he does listen. He's a chap called Matt Rains. He's a huge Las Palmas fan. I'm sure he would definitely want to hear your thoughts on what was it like going to the Estadio Gran Canaria, because my one takeaway from it is when you go to that stadium, it looks like it seats 200,000 people, but it doesn't. It's quite a strange thing, but in a very, very unique place.
I think I just compared it in the book to being a kind of, it almost looks like one of these, do you know, the American college football stadiums, like the Open Bowl, where you're going to go and watch, you know, someone play American football. And obviously, even though Gran Canaria is one of these places where it's kind of warm all year round, you're really close to the sea, so you're going to get buffeted. And never, you know, the second half, I went to see him against Girona, I think last year, and you're getting absolutely, once it starts raining, you're getting buffeted, and, you know, everyone's pulling on the plastic mats and all the rest of it. And, you know, unlike a lot of clubs, it's not in the middle of a barrio, it's not in the city centre, it's kind of near there's kind of a big shopping mall and stuff, but it has got its own charm. And I mean, the American comparisons, even there's a big sort of what looks like a car park behind one of the stands behind the goal, but they almost have what looks like a tailgate party going on in their pre-game, and you've got these kind of dances going on and food stalls. And again, it just strikes at that diversity within Spanish football. And I think probably a lot of people, I think there's 1 million Brits every year go to Gran Canaria, and probably a lot of people think, oh, I'm not going there. Or they'll think, oh, well, I'd go if they're playing Barcelona, or I'll go if they're playing Real Madrid. Well, bad news, you're not going to get a ticket for those games. You know, unlucky. If you pick a week where Madrid or Barcelona are getting there, you are going to struggle to get in that ground unless you're happy to pay an exorbitant amount of money. But go there when they're at home at Ceuta. You know, go there when they're playing one of the lesser-known clubs, and just mix in with the locals, because, again, it's just a brilliant experience. And what I do find when I've travelled to grounds in Spain, there are certain grounds you can go elsewhere in Europe where you have to be very careful to blend in. You wear black, you know, you keep your head down so you're not standing out as a tourist or a foreigner. In Spain, it's a really, you know, even though there's an ultras culture and all the rest of it, it's a really welcoming culture. And people, I usually find, I don't know if you lads find the same thing, people are really pleased that you've come. And there are other countries like that, but definitely there's a sense in Spain that people are really glad that you've come. And when you're not talking about one of the big two, they're really glad that you've come to their club.
Yeah. Yeah, it's noticeable, isn't it? I feel like, you know, and I'm sure you can attest to this as well as anyone, Nick, with Malaga, but it's almost like you are embraced, really, for giving them time. And the only place I've been to sort of compare that, I've been to a few games in Germany for various reasons, but Kaiserslautern and Augsburg were two clubs that, when I attended them games, they were genuinely enthusiastic. And it's like that in Spain as well, you know, particularly, you know, Mallorca. You're well received there. It's a holiday island, isn't it? But you'd be surprised at how many people who go on holiday there don't seem to show an interest in going to Sommosh, which, you know, there's something wrong with them in my opinion. But when you do go, you are made to feel welcome, and that speaks volumes, I think, about the football culture in Spain. I mean, we've just spent fair chunk of time a minute or two ago talking about Real Betis. Betis are one of the most supported clubs across Spain, behind obviously the big two. I can't remember if the third or fourth behind Valencia, because of the huge diaspora of working class Andalusians that spread across, particularly the northwest. In fact, it's definitely they are the second most supported club in the city of Barcelona over Espanyol because of the diaspora. And yet, people are just proud of it, and they just want to have a genuine. There's an authenticity about the way people in Spain appreciate the sport and appreciate other people taking an interest.
Yeah, I mean, sorry.
I was going to say, I'll testify for that. Especially the further down you go, whether we've been to Guadalajara, which is a club just outside of Madrid. Sort of like if you get to the airport and instead of turning right to go into the city, you turn left and you end up in the outskirts. Or going to Yecla, which is in the middle of nowhere in Murcia. You turn up there, and we turned up as five British fellows, and it was. Not only was it the embrace you got from going to there to watch a football match, there's also a curiosity. How did you find us? How do you know about us? What are you doing here? And then you tell your story, and then you become, you get this shared affinity, if that makes sense. And I think that's something that, a lot of groundhoppers like to get as well. They want to get that shared experience, that shared affinity with a club. And then, like you say, they'll go back and they'll go back and they'll go back. And I think Spain is a perfect sort of like ground for that. You know what I mean? Like no matter where you go, you will always be embraced by the locals. You'll be shown where to go. It's a naturally a very hospitable country to do that in, which I think is absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I wanted to achieve from the book is to kind of send that signal to people. And I'm not trying to deter people from going to the Camp Nou or the Bernabeu, but these are two big iconic clubs in huge iconic cities, playing out of, shortly anyway, when the work on the Camp Nou is finished. Really iconic stadia. But what I'm hoping to achieve is actually people think, great, go there, enjoy it. But there's far more to this country than that. Be a little bit more bold. Even if you just happen to be in Spain for a family holiday, have a look, Google, who's your closest team? It doesn't need to be a La Liga team. It could be someone further down, the league system, but get out there and explore Spain. And I'm a big believer, actually, that, and it's something I mentioned a few times in a book, by going to football, you get a real sense of the culture of a place beyond the tourist traps, and you get to really feel the pulse of a place. And I think Spain's a great example of that. It's such a diverse country, and going to the football, you immediately get a kind of sense of the local identity, whether you're in the Basque Country, whether you're in Catalonia, or whether you're down in Andalusia or one of the Canary Islands. So yeah, it's just, if I achieve nothing else with the book, hopefully those people who read it will make more of an effort to get to these grounds, and particularly these grounds in Spain.
No, that sounds absolutely perfect. And there's one iconic stadium I wanted to finish on for this one, because it's a stadium that we're not going to have for much longer, and that is Mestalla in Valencia. Now, I call this like a grail ground for me, because, as part of my ultimate football experience was, how do I get to Mestalla? And similar as we were talking about Bilbao earlier, it's not necessarily easy to get to Valencia from, especially the northwest of England. So I ended up flying into Alicante, booking the wrong train to Valencia, which was and then there was no other trains that you could book on to get to. So we ended up hiring a car to drive 2 hours north to Valencia. But it was all worth it to get in and around, the city and around Mestalla before the game. And, a lot of people will, add rose tinted glasses to these kind of things, but genuinely, there is nowhere else I've been that has sort of everything that checks the list for a football ground experience than Mestalla for me. It is up there on my top shelf. I don't know if you guys agree with me on that one.
No, absolutely. I mean, when I was writing the book, it was one of the places I was desperate to get to myself. As it turned out, I sent my friend Harry, who's in the area, said, right, you're going doing this one for me. I've interviewed local fans. I've done the research. You're heading to the game. You're going to be my eyes and ears on the ground. And he painted a really vivid picture for me, which really helped me write in the chapter. But then I thought I need to get there, and I tried over Easter to get there, and just logistically, it was just impossible. I couldn't fit it with my plans, even though there is a direct flight from Manchester actually, but just getting it to fit my plans. But I'm like you; it's my holy grail now, so I need to get there before those bulldozers move in. And I know one of the things I cover in the chapter, there's very much, I'd say, split opinion. I suspect more of the local fans would sooner keep the old ground than move into this new one, and that's one of the things that I cover in the chapter. But from a selfish point of view, I'll be as soon as those La Liga fixtures are, as if La Liga fixtures are ever fully confirmed, but as soon as we've got an indication of which dates the games might potentially happen on, I'm going to be straight on Skyscanner, and I'm going to be doing everything I can to get there. If nothing else, I'll get to a pre-season friendly there, hopefully. But yeah, he's definitely one of those iconic venues, and it's very much a case of when it's gone, it's gone.
Yeah, like you say, they appear, don't they, Paul, to be full steam ahead with the new Mestalla, which obviously has its own sort of like fascinating tale of running out of money, then suddenly finding it behind the sofa and continuing, and then leaving it stood still for 15 years, and now it's going to be a World Cup venue. That could be its own podcast, but for me, Mestalla is sacred ground, and the experiences you get from it. I went to watch a game there in the pouring rain. It was a 2-2 draw with Real Valladolid. Football on the pitch was turgid. This was before Carlos Corberán came in. It was when Valencia were sort of like battling relegation. However, you wouldn't know it. You wouldn't know it around the outskirts of the stadium. You wouldn't know it about the people you were talking into in the bars, sort of within the barrio. You wouldn't know it in the ground either. You would think that the way that they were cheering and the atmosphere that, Valencia would be going for another La Liga title. It's just one of those places where it feels like hallowed turf, and that's, the best way I could describe it. So, like yourself, Rob, I would say to anybody who's got the opportunity, try and get there. I'm still skeptical about whether it will be gone. I can't see how this stadium that they've left, sort of like rotting for 15 years can be anywhere near sort of like suitable to just start building on or anything like that. But
worries weren't that the concrete had been in the ground and exposed to the elements that long that it might actually not be structurally sound anymore.
Yeah.
There's quite a lot of local people who are kind of praying that is the case. Certainly when the people I interviewed and spoke to, I did not sense any real enthusiasm, particularly because the perception is now that we were sold this vision of this modern iconic venue, and what they're kind of getting now is a kind of reduced budget generation of that. So yeah, I suspect a lot of local people will be quite happy if it never happens.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And Paul, for you too, I can't actually remember if you've been to Mestalla.
No, I haven't actually, Nick. No, I do remember you telling me all about it, and I was really, really pleased for you. Not bad.
We'll have to go next season. I'll tell you what, if there's a flight out of Manchester, we'll all meet there. We'll get into the bar beforehand. We'll have a drink, and then we'll all go to Mestalla. I can show you around. I'm practically a local now after my one visit. So I won't brag too much, but
we'll sort that. We could even do a podcast out there.
Yes,
that sounds absolutely ideal. Ideal.
It's been so high on my list for a long time that when you sent you were there and you were sending me pictures, like dead excited. I can't tell you how much of a sulk I had on. I was absolutely fuming. I was like, it's iconic. It's. Yeah, I think I'll be sad if it does go. I think I will be so sad about it. And to your point, Rob, Valencia fans definitely were sold a big dream, and I'm not sure how it's going to materialize now. I mean, like you, I'm skeptical about how salvageable the concrete would be, but I'm not a civil engineer or anything like that. And it just seems a bit, I don't know. But we'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see.
Yeah, and again, obviously Mestalla is the one. But if you are in the Valencia region, you've got the opportunities to go to. Obviously, there's Levante's ground, there's Ciudad de Valencia. You've got the Estadio de la Cerámica up where in Villarreal, which obviously has its own amazing story too. And what I really want to go to as well is Castellón. Obviously, their sort of like recent upturn and potentially being in a league next year. They've done some really fascinating stuff that you can see in their grounds, and their fan base is really, really passionate too. But that's for a different podcast. Rob, it's been brilliant to have you on this episode. Where can we find your book? Where can we expect to see it popping up? When can we expect to see it popping up?
So it's available to pre-order in all the obvious places right now. So you can go online, Google it, and it'll take you to the page to pre-order. It will be appearing in the bookshops, Waterstones. It'll be, obviously, I'd urge you, if you can, support local independent booksellers as well, because they need all the help you can get. If you're in the Northwest, I have got a launch event in Stockport, Serenity Booksellers, on Thursday the 25th. I've got a similar event in Leeds at Truman Books in Farsley on June the 12th. I'm doing Leeds Lit Fest on June the 13th. So I'll be out and about, and hopefully if you get the chance, if you can't, if you can come and meet me, brilliant. If you can't, get online, order a copy, and hopefully people will enjoy it.
Yeah, I'll definitely keep an eye out for that one in Stockport. It's only an hour's drive for me, so I think I might do that. So we'll put all that information alongside the episode. We'll put some links onto stories and things like that. If you want to go and follow Rob on X, it's RJ Wrights. On Instagram, it is Global Groundhopper. Really fascinating social page as well to keep up with everything that Rob is doing. So definitely go and give him a follow on there. But Rob, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks a lot for having me.
No problem at all, and hopefully we'll have you on again soon, or the joint podcast when we all go to Valencia.
I'm planning the trip already. As soon as we come offline, I'm going to be looking at Skyscanner and just looking at provisional dates. So yeah, we'll sort that.
That's it. Chalk us in. Paul, thank you so much again. We are careering towards the end of the season here in El Partido, but it's obviously been brilliant. So a few more episodes to go, but thank you for joining me once again.
Oh, it's been brilliant. I've really enjoyed listening to Rob talk about your book, and the bits that I've been able to read so far, I've absolutely loved, and I'd encourage anybody to pick up a copy. Another really great episode again. As you say, we've got another couple lined up before we take our summer break. I think this summer break will probably not be as long as last year's summer break, if I'm remembering correctly. I think last year did we have 6 weeks off. I think we've only got about 4 off this time, haven't we? So people won't have to wait too long. It is. Yeah. It's just an opportunity for us to spend time with our families and get some brownie points in before the season starts, isn't it? So.
Oh yeah. I've got to remind my wife and daughter what I look like, to be fair, because I keep hopping up here every other night to go and do something. But yes, and thank you to you guys at home as well. Your support is always appreciated, and like I say, for your support so far in this second series of El Partido. But for now, I'll say thank you very much. We'll catch you next time. Hasta luego.